I am Chelsea Rayner, 29 years old woman. I'm a freelance editor living in Columbus, Ohio, and last year I finalized my divorce after 6 years of marriage. What happened with my sister next, what she did to my name, my finances, and my heart nearly broke me, but reclaiming it all, that changed everything. The first time I noticed something was wrong, I was standing in line at the grocery store debating between two brands of almond milk when my phone buzzed. Capital Trust Bank, your payment of $643.19 is past due. Please pay immediately to avoid further action. I stared at the screen like it had been written in a different language. I didn't even have a Capital Trust account. At first, I assumed it was spam, a phishing scam, something gross and glitchy. But the next day, it happened again. This time from Midwestern Credit Line. Then Loom Financial Services. 3 messages, 3 accounts, all in my name. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop, heart pounding. I logged into Credit Secure, a monitoring service I'd signed up for years ago but rarely checked. And there it was. 3 new credit cards, all opened within the last 6 months, all maxed out, all delinquent. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my fingers numb, like someone had quietly set fire to my life and walked away whistling. The first person I called was my sister Hannah. Not because I suspected her, but because she was always the calm one, the one who'd fix things. I could hear the hum of her TV in the background when she picked up. "Hey Chels, everything okay?" My voice cracked. I think my identity been stolen. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just a little too long. She asked, "What do you mean?" I told her the accounts, the alerts, the balances. When I finished, the silence on her end was deafening. And then she said the thing that I'll never forget, not because of what it meant, but how she said it. "Wow, that's awful, people are disgusting." Her voice had gone flat, tense, like she was reading lines off a cue card. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was too overwhelmed, too focused on canceling cards, freezing my credit, filing police reports. But looking back, that sentence was the first crack in the mirror. Over the next few days, I went into survival mode. I printed every statement, logged every fraudulent charge, filed a report with the FTC, spent 3 hours on the phone with the Ohio Attorney General's office. And every time I found a new detail, a shipping address, a cell number used for verification, even a birth date listed as 3/12, a sick feeling started rising in my stomach. Because that's Hannah's birthday. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't believe it. She was my older sister, my best friend, the maid of honor at my wedding, the one who taught me how to do liquid eyeliner and make ramen taste like magic. We'd shared bunk beds, secret sweatshirts. The idea that she could do something like this. It was like saying the moon was fake. But the evidence piled up. One charge was made to an online jewelry site, the kind Hannah loved. Another was to a skincare box I knew she'd been raving about on Instagram. And then I found the shipping address. It was our parents' old house. The one Hannah had moved into temporarily after her breakup. The one I helped her clean up when her ex left her with nothing but an air mattress and a half bag of cat food. I remember sitting on my bathroom floor that night, knees pulled to my chest, phone in hand. I texted her, "Please tell me it wasn't you." No response. The next morning, I got a voicemail. Just 8 words. "I'm sorry, I was desperate, I'll fix it." My heart dropped. I wanted to scream, to cry, to understand. Instead, I opened a new Google Doc and started typing every detail I could remember. Because if she wasn't going to fix it, I would, even if it meant taking my own sister to court. The moment I heard Hannah's voicemail, I played it twice. 8 words. Slurred, tired, guilt-soaked. "I'm sorry, I was desperate, I'll fix it." But there was no plan, no detail, no apology. Just "I'm sorry," like that could undo thousands of dollars of damage. I sat at my desk staring at the screen. My credit score had dropped 112 points. Rent was due in 2 weeks and I didn't even know what other accounts she might have touched. There was no time to cry. I needed a lawyer. I called my friend Samira, who worked in civil law. We hadn't talked in months, but when I told her what happened, she dropped everything. You need to file a report, she said. Document everything, file an affidavit of fraud, and if she's admitted it, you may have to press charges. Press charges, I whispered. Against my own sister. It sounded like betrayal, until I realized she had betrayed me first. I texted Hannah the next day. We need to talk in person tonight. She replied instantly. Come over, I'll be here. Her apartment smelled like burnt coffee and cheap candles. She looked small when she opened the door in an old hoodie, dark circles under her eyes, but I didn't feel sympathy, I felt fire. She tried to hug me. I stepped back. I know it was you. She didn't deny it. Instead, she broke down, sat on the floor, face buried in her hands, sobbing like a child. I didn't know what else to do, she cried. My student loans, the rent, everything was falling apart. I didn't say a word. I let her cry. Let her beg. And when the sobbing turned to silence, I said, You didn't even ask. We sat in that horrible silence for what felt like an hour. Finally, she looked up. I'll pay it back, all of it. How? I'll get a second job, I'll sell my stuff, You stole over $14,000, Hannah. You ruined my credit. That's not something you fix with a side hustle. She looked ashamed, like she hadn't thought that far. Like she believed the words I'm sorry would rewind the whole thing. I stood. If you're serious about making this right, I'll give you a chance, but if you lie to me again, even once, I will report this. To the bank, to the police, to a judge. She nodded slowly. But in her eyes I saw it. That flicker of resentment, the one that said, How dare you hold me accountable? For the next few weeks, she sent small payments. $50 here, $75 there. Each one Venmoed with the note, making it right. But my trust didn't rebuild. It calcified. I started therapy again, something I hadn't done since the divorce. In one session, my therapist asked, What would justice feel like to you? I didn't know how to answer. Because it wasn't about money anymore. It was about identity. She hadn't just stolen my credit. She's stolen my name. Then came the letter from Capital Trust. They were denying my fraud claim. Too many of the charges matched my old purchase habits. Too many of the shipping addresses matched family properties. And I hadn't filed police charges yet, which meant they were holding me liable for the $4,300 balance and the ongoing interest. I called Hannah in a fury. You told me you'd fix this. She sounded exhausted. I'm trying, but they're saying I can't just call and take ownership. It's more complicated. I'm done, I snapped. I warned you. And I hung up. That night I filed the police report. I gave them her full name. The voicemail. The charges. The shipping addresses. And the transcript of her admission. And then I contacted a civil attorney. Not to press criminal charges, not yet. But to begin wage garnishment proceedings. If she wasn't going to take responsibility, I was going to make sure she paid in full. It was the most excruciating decision of my life. But it was also the first time in months I slept without waking up in a panic. Because for the first time, I was taking my name back. The summons was delivered to Hannah's apartment on a cold Thursday afternoon. I know because I was watching from my car across the street. A part of me felt ashamed, like some undercover agent in my own family's drama. But the other part, the one that had waded through overdraft fees, sleepless nights, and humiliating credit rejections. That part wanted her to look the sheriff in the eye and feel it. She opened the door barefoot, took the envelope without protest. And as the sheriff walked back to his car, I saw her glance down the street. She didn't see me, but I saw her mouth a single word. Chelsea. 3 days later, I got the email from her lawyer. A bland man named Jason Withers who referred to me as the plaintiff and suggested an amicable settlement between sisters. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I forwarded it to my attorney and said, No deal unless it includes full repayment, wage garnishment enforcement, and an official admission of guilt for the creditor appeals. This wasn't revenge. It was repair. We went to mediation first. The room was beige and cold, and the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. Hannah looked wrecked, no makeup, chipped nail polish, her knee bouncing under the table. She wouldn't look at me. When the mediator asked if either party wanted to speak before proceeding, I raised my hand. "I'd like to read a statement," I said. And I pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "My name is Chelsea Rayner. I'm 29 years old. And I've worked every year of my adult life to maintain my credit, my name, and my dignity." That was all taken from me, not by a stranger but by my sister. This isn't about money. It's about trust. And I deserve the right to live without being afraid of the people I love. When I finished, I looked at her. For the first time in weeks, she met my eyes. And in that moment, I saw it, not just guilt but grief. She whispered, "I'm sorry." But I didn't respond. Not because I hadn't heard her, but because she needed to say it to the judge. A few weeks later, the court ruled in my favor. $14,392 to be repaid in full. A wage garnishment order effective immediately, deducting 22% of her net income. The judge noted clear, overwhelming evidence of financial deception and personal harm. I walked out of that courtroom into the bright afternoon sun feeling hollow. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just empty. Because even when you win, when the law backs you, the cost is still real. My friends threw me a little dinner that night. Champagne, candlelight, quiet toasts. Samira hugged me and whispered, "You did the hard thing, the right thing." But as I sipped my drink, I couldn't stop thinking of Hannah. What was she doing? Was she okay? Would she ever forgive me for protecting myself? The first garnished paycheck hit her account 2 weeks later. I know because she Venmo'd me $7.23 with a single broken heart emoji. It was petty, childish. But it still stung. I deleted the notification. Over the next few months, I worked on rebuilding my credit. I got a secured card. Started sending letters to each agency one by one, documenting everything: the fraud, the judgment, the police report. I met with a financial advisor, took a budgeting course, and started a spreadsheet called Reclamation. Every row was a step back to myself. One day, I got an envelope in the mail from Hannah's lawyer. Inside was a handwritten letter, her first since this all began. "I don't expect you to forgive me, I wouldn't. But I want you to know I'm working 2 jobs now. I joined a financial recovery group. And every time a payment gets deducted from my check, I remind myself, this isn't punishment. It's the cost of truth." She closed it with, "I hope someday we can rebuild, even just a bridge." I cried for an hour. Not out of pain, but because for the first time it felt like maybe, just maybe, there was something left to salvage. Not the old sisterhood, but maybe a new kind. The letter stayed on my dresser for 3 days. Unfolded, unmoved. Every morning I'd glance at it, every night I'd avoid it. And then one Sunday afternoon, I picked it up and reread the last line. "I hope someday we can rebuild, even just a bridge." I don't know what made me do it, but I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and created a new folder titled Chelsea Rebuilding. Inside, I drafted a reply. Not a long one, not emotional, just honest. "Hannah, this isn't forgiveness. It's acknowledgement. You hurt me deeply, but I can see that you're trying. I'm not ready to be close again, not yet. But if you stay in recovery, stay honest, and continue paying back what was taken, I'm willing to consider talking. One day." Chelsea. I didn't send it right away. I let it sit in my drafts, untouched, for nearly a week. And then, on a random Thursday, after fixing a typo in a grocery list, I hit send. She didn't reply for 2 weeks. When she finally did, it was a single message. "Thank you, I won't mess this up." Over the next month, her payments continued, steady, reliable. Her Venmo notes changed. From money with wings to step 4 to rebuilding one brick at a time. And something inside me began to shift. Not quickly, not perfectly, but like a door slowly creaking open to let light in. One rainy night in March, I got an invite. An email from a local community center. Financial Recovery and Fraud Victim Support Circle, Thursday, 7 p.m. The name at the bottom. Hannah Rayner, volunteer facilitator. I stared at it for a long time. Was this real? Was she actually putting herself out there, admitting to strangers what she'd done to her own sister? I didn't reply. But that Thursday night, I parked across the street and watched. The building was a modest brick box with flickering lights. Inside, a circle of metal chairs, coffee in styrofoam cups, one woman in her 50s crying quietly into a tissue. And there at the front was Hannah. Hair pulled back, no makeup, sincere posture. And a line I heard clear as day. The worst thing I ever did was betray the person who trusted me most. But the best thing I've done since is own it. I didn't stay. I didn't go in. But I drove home with my heart beating in a way I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, trembling, terrifying hope. Later that week, I sent her a text. I saw you speak, you looked like yourself. She replied instantly. I was thinking of you the whole time. We began exchanging short voice notes after that. Just 10-second check-ins, her telling me about the group, me telling her about credit rebuild milestones. She cheered when I told her my score had finally passed 650 again. I cheered when she said she'd paid off her smallest personal loan. Then came the real breakthrough. One afternoon, she sent me a voice memo. Her tone was quieter than usual. There's something I need to say, not as your sister, but as the person who stole from you. I know I cost you more than money. I cost you sleep, safety, trust. I thought you had it all, Chelsea. The apartment, the career, the independence. I didn't realize how fragile it was until I broke it. I just wanted to say thank you for not destroying me, for giving me this chance. And if we never get back what we had, I'll still be grateful I got to say this. Thank you for being better than I was. I cried. For the first time in weeks, I really cried. Not for the loss, not even for the betrayal. But because in that moment, I realized the bridge she talked about. We were actually building it. One plank at a time. The next time I saw Hannah in person, it wasn't planned. It was a random Saturday in April at the downtown farmers market. I was picking out strawberries when I heard my name called behind me. Chelsea. I turned around and there she was, holding a reusable tote, wearing an old denim jacket we used to fight over in high school. She looked hesitant, I probably did too. But then something strange happened. We both smiled. It wasn't big or forced, just real. I didn't think you came to this market, I said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. I usually don't, she replied, but the support group was canceled this morning, so I figured, fresh air. We stood there awkwardly holding fruit, unsure what came next. Then I motioned to the coffee cart behind us. You want to sit for a few minutes? She nodded. We found a bench near the fountain. The air smelled like espresso and honey bread. Musicians were playing a soft acoustic set nearby. And for the first time in almost a year, we had a conversation that didn't feel like it was made of eggshells. She told me she started a budgeting course online, that she'd met a woman in her support group who used to be an accountant and was teaching her how to track expenses. I told her I was thinking of writing a personal essay about financial betrayal. She winced. But then she said, you should, people need to hear those stories. We didn't talk about the court order. We didn't talk about the debt. I drank coffee with her. I listened without checking for lies in her voice. Today I remembered who we were. And I started to imagine who we might still become. A week later, I got an email from Capital Trust. They reversed their decision. The fraud claim was now accepted. They had received a signed affidavit from Hannah admitting to the account misuse and detailing how she'd obtained my information. Her name, her handwriting, her responsibility. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not just because of the relief, but because it was the first time she had taken ownership on paper without me asking her to. I texted her that night. Capital Trust reversed their ruling. They got your affidavit. She replied, I wanted you to be able to move forward without them holding you back. You deserve that. The next day, I walked into my bank and opened a new checking account under stricter fraud protection. When the teller asked if I wanted to add any authorized users, I laughed. No, not anymore. That evening, I got a letter in the mail. A hand-drawn card. On the front was a little cartoon bridge made of mismatched wood and rope. Underneath it read, "One plank at a time." Inside it said, "You didn't have to give me another chance. But you did. And I promise this time I'm building something worth crossing back to." Age. I placed the card next to the one she'd sent after the court hearing. 2 letters. 2 different versions of the same sister. One broken, one rebuilding. And somewhere in between them, me. By summer, I had settled into a strange, cautious peace with Hannah. We weren't close, not exactly, but we were steady. She made her garnishment payments without fail. Every month like clockwork. And more than that, she stayed involved in the support group at the community center, volunteered at the Saturday morning sessions, spoke on panels about financial accountability. She didn't just say she'd changed, she showed it. And it mattered. Because actions, as I had learned, speak so much louder than apologies. One July morning, I got a text from her. Big ask, can we meet? I was already halfway through my iced latte at a cafe downtown. The thought of seeing her without prep gave me pause, but something in me said go. So I replied, sure, 20 mins. She showed up wearing a sundress and beat-up sneakers, her hair tucked into a loose braid. When she sat down, she looked more nervous than I'd seen her in months. Hannah. She exhaled sharply. Okay, here's the thing. The center is doing this fundraiser next month. A storytelling night. Theme is repair. I nodded, unsure where this was going. They asked me to read something, and I want to tell our story. My stomach turned. All of it. She hesitated. Not court details, not financials, just the emotional truth, the harm, the healing, the bridge we're building. I'd change your name, of course. I looked away, processing. I get if it's too much, she added quickly. If it feels like exploitation or too soon, I'll back out. Hannah, I interrupted gently. She looked up. Let me think about it, okay? I spent the next few days digging through my journals. I reread every line I'd written since that first call from the debt collector. Rage. Shame. Loneliness. The slow climb back to clarity. I thought about how far we'd both come and how much further we still had to go. And then I opened a blank page and wrote a new entry. If healing is real, it must be shared. If we want to rewrite our family story, maybe it starts with telling the old one. Not to relive the hurt, but to understand it. I texted her the next morning. Okay, do it, but I want to hear it first. She sent back 10 heart emojis. And then a few minutes later. Deal. 2 weeks later, she showed up at my apartment with a folder. She was jittery, sweating. This is it, she said, first draft. She handed it to me, then turned away, arms crossed like she couldn't bear to watch my reaction. I read it slowly. It started with the moment she saw my name on her credit report. The temptation, the rationalization, the choice. Then it moved into the spiral, hiding letters, deleting alerts, the gnawing guilt every time we spoke. And then the moment I served her papers. It wasn't just a wake-up call, she wrote. It was the collapse of the illusion I'd built around myself. By the end, I was crying. So was she. When I looked up, I said, it's honest and brave and hard to read, but I think you should do it. The night of the fundraiser, I stood in the back of the small auditorium. Every chair was full, string lights dangled from the ceiling. There was the smell of cookies and nervous energy. When Hannah stepped up to the mic, she took a long pause. Then she began. And she didn't hold back. She told them about the betrayal not just of me but of herself. How easy it is to justify a little theft when you feel like the world owes you something. How shame builds up like rust, slow, silent, and corrosive. How healing only began the moment she admitted out loud, "I hurt someone I love." People were crying by the end. Some clapped, some stood. I stayed in the shadows, heart pounding. And when she looked out into the crowd and locked eyes with me, she didn't say my name. But she didn't need to. Afterward, a young woman came up to her. She looked barely 20. "I've never told anyone this," she said, "but I did the same thing to my brother. I thought he hated me forever. Your story gives me hope." And that's when I knew. Sharing this story hadn't just repaired something between us. It had built something for others. A roadmap. A mirror. A light. The night after the fundraiser, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine, replaying Hannah's performance in my mind. The steady rise and fall of her voice, the way she stood without notes, the raw truth in every word. I had gone there to support her. But I left changed. Not just because she'd spoken our truth, but because I realized something terrifying and freeing. She wasn't the only one who'd been hiding. I had too. Behind my spreadsheets, my control, my rules. Behind the version of myself who couldn't be hurt again. The next morning, I opened my blog. It had been dormant for nearly 8 months, ever since the whole nightmare began. But now the cursor blinked back at me, patient. Waiting. I wrote, "My name is Chelsea Rayner. A year ago, I was the victim of identity theft. The thief was my sister. This is what happened and how we found our way back." I didn't post it right away. I stared at it for days. But eventually, with a deep breath and trembling fingers, I clicked publish. Then I turned off my phone and went for a walk around the lake. By the time I came back, there were 38 comments. By midnight, 220. People from everywhere, strangers, friends, anonymous usernames, all sharing stories. A woman from Seattle wrote, "My mom did this to me. I've never told anyone, thank you." A man from New Jersey said, "I forgave my brother, but I never healed. Your story helped me take the first step." One comment simply read, "You're brave and generous and not alone." I cried reading them. Not because they were sad, though many were, but because they were real. Honest. Connected. It made me think of all the nights I sat in my apartment, too ashamed to tell anyone what was happening. Now that silence was broken. Shattered. And in its place was something louder, warmer. A chorus of people saying, "Me too." 2 days later, I got an email from a local podcast host. She'd read the blog and wanted to interview me and Hannah together. I forwarded it to my sister with a note. "Want to tell our story out loud?" She responded with one word. "Yes." We recorded in a tiny studio above a bookstore, surrounded by bookshelves and the faint smell of dust and paper. The host was gentle, guiding us through the timeline. I spoke about the panic when the calls started, the betrayal, the court. Hannah spoke about addiction, secrecy, recovery. There were moments where our voices cracked, moments where we paused to collect ourselves. But when the interview ended, I felt lighter. And when the episode aired, the response was overwhelming. We were invited to speak at a nonprofit event about restorative justice. A university ethics class used the episode for a case study. And more than anything, people kept asking, "How did you forgive her?" I always answered honestly. I didn't forgive her all at once. I forgave her in pieces. With every payment, every truth, every moment she chose honesty over escape. Forgiveness wasn't a gift, it was a process. And I'm still in it. By fall, Hannah had paid back 70% of the stolen debt. The garnishment order was nearly fulfilled. But one day she messaged me. "What happens when I finish paying?" I knew what she meant. "What happens to us?" I replied. "Then we start paying into something else. Something better." She liked the message. and then replied, like a joint project. I blinked at the screen, then typed back, I'm listening. When Hannah said joint project, I didn't know she meant literal joint ownership. She called me the next day and said, I've been saving some of what I earn from the group's honorariums, and I want to start something with you. I laughed like a coffee shop. She chuckled, no, a digital space, a platform for stories like ours, financial betrayal, forgiveness, recovery, victims, and the people who hurt them. I paused. It sounded idealistic, risky, raw. But she wasn't wrong, we hadn't seen anything like that out there. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt something stir in me. Purpose. We spent the next 3 weeks building a site. Late nights, shared docs, voice memos. We called it Dead and Grace. The tagline, stories of trust broken and rebuilt. I handled the writing framework, she handled outreach to support circles. We launched with 5 stories ours, 2 from her recovery group and 2 from anonymous submissions. By the end of the first week, we had over 3,000 visitors. People were writing in, sharing their trauma, their anger, their growth. A woman from Ohio sent us a 3-page letter. When my daughter used my Social Security to apply for a car loan, I thought I'd never speak to her again. Your project gave me the courage to write her for the first time in 7 years. We cried reading it. At the 1-year mark of my court case, Hannah made her final payment. $196.83, the last remaining balance on one of the stolen cards. She didn't send a Venmo emoji this time. Just one word. Free. I stared at the notification for a long time. Not because of the amount, but because I didn't feel what I thought I'd feel. I wasn't triumphant, I wasn't even relieved. I was still sad. And that surprised me. That night I called her. I thought when this was over, I'd feel like I got something back, I told her. She was quiet for a second, then said, you didn't get back what you lost, but maybe you got something else. Like what? Your voice. We met for dinner that weekend, something we hadn't done in over a year. Same booth as before. Same cheap sushi. But everything felt different. She told me she'd been asked to co-lead a panel at the state's Financial Recovery Summit, that the nonprofit we spoke for was considering her for a board advisory position. I told her a major publication had contacted me about republishing my blog post. We sat there for 2 hours laughing, remembering. And at one point I looked at her and said, you know what I realized? What? You didn't just break my trust, you shattered the version of our family that pretended everything was okay. She winced. I reached across the table. That's not a bad thing, I said softly, it's how the truth got out. By the end of the night, we were walking toward our cars in silence. Then Hannah stopped and turned to me. I know we can't go back and I don't want to erase what happened, but do you think there's still a version of us that's worth having? I looked at her, this version of my sister I never expected to know, one who was flawed, bruised, but honest. And I said, I think we're building it. Later in my apartment, I pulled out the file I had kept hidden for months. The one labeled Court Docs plus Credit Damage. I opened it, read it, then slowly I placed it in my shredder. Page by page. Debt by debt. Not to forget, but to finally fully move forward. The following month, Hannah and I were invited to speak at a regional women's finance and wellness summit. It was held in a hotel ballroom with floor-length curtains, cold tea, and nervous chatter filling the air. A place that just a year ago I wouldn't have set foot in, not to tell my story at least. But here I was, standing backstage next to my sister. She wore a gray blazer I didn't recognize, her fingers wrapped around a note card that had gone soft at the corners. I could see her hands shaking. You okay? I asked. She nodded too fast. I will be once it's over. I reached for her hand and squeezed. We're doing this together. Our session was called Broken Trust Built Bridges. It drew a bigger crowd than expected. Rows of women, some young, some with gray streaks in their hair, filled every seat, notebooks open, pens ready. And when the moderator introduced us, I saw something flash in Hannah's eyes. Fear, yes, but also something fiercer. Resolve. I started. I told them about the day I got that first call from the debt collector, about my spiral into anxiety, paranoia, spreadsheets, and tears. I told them about the court order, the letters, the rage. And then I told them about what came after the rebuilding. Not just of credit scores, of identity, of trust. Then Hannah spoke. She told them about temptation, the shame that follows the desperate choices, the lies. But most of all, she talked about accountability. The first step to forgiveness, she said, was telling the truth out loud. There were gasped tears and then silence. Heavy listening silence. When the session ended, women lined up to speak with us. Some just wanted to say thank you. Others whispered confessions they'd never said aloud before. One woman, maybe in her 60s, grabbed my hands. "My daughter did this to me," she said. "I didn't press charges, but we haven't spoken in 4 years. Your story gives me a thread, something to tug on." I squeezed her hand back. "Start with the truth," I said, "even if it shakes." Back home, I sat with that moment. That line, even if it shakes. Because it had taken me a year to realize something about truth, it doesn't always come easy. Sometimes it stutters, stumbles. But if you say it anyway, if you speak it again and again, eventually it finds steady ground. And then it carries you forward. One evening in November, I found an old photo while cleaning out a drawer. Me and Hannah, ages 7 and 9. We're sitting on our front steps, Halloween candy spilled between us, laughing so hard our eyes are closed. I texted it to her with a single line. "Before we were anything else, we were this." She replied, "Still are." That Thanksgiving, she brought pumpkin pie. She also brought new boundaries. She asked before entering rooms. She offered to help with cleanup. She didn't assume forgiveness meant forgetting. And I didn't pretend I was fully healed. But when we stood next to each other in the kitchen, loading dishes into the washer, I looked over and smiled. "I never thought we'd get here." She paused, then said, "I didn't either, but I'm glad we did." Later that night, after the last guest left and the dishes were done, she hugged me at the door. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. I pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. "I'm proud of us." Spring brought a strange calm to everything. No hearings, no collectors, no court letters. Just warmer mornings, freshly brewed coffee, and a rhythm that finally felt like peace. But that peace didn't come from pretending the past never happened. It came from learning to live beside it. Like a scar still visible, but no longer sore to the touch. One Sunday morning, I stood in the community center hallway, staring at a new flyer tacked to the bulletin board. It had a picture of Hannah mid-laugh, hand raised during a panel. Above her image were bold letters. "Dead and Grace Presence. Recovery in Real Time, a live event series." I hadn't realized the nonprofit had expanded it into a speaking tour. I walked into the event space and found her setting up chairs. She looked up, smiled. "You came." "Of course I did." She straightened a stack of brochures, then hesitated. "I'm doing the closing talk today, it's personal." I didn't ask what it was about, I just squeezed her shoulder and said, "I'll be here." The talk was titled, "When You Become the Villain in Someone Else's Story." Her voice didn't shake this time. She told the crowd how easy it is to think you're the exception, that your desperation, your justification, your pain makes it less bad. But harm is harm, she said. And the people who carry the weight of it deserve the truth. She paused, then scanned the crowd. Her eyes found mine. And with that same even voice, she said, "I wouldn't be standing here if she hadn't drawn a line, if she hadn't demanded justice and left space for redemption." Tears slid down my cheeks. Not out of grief or anger or even forgiveness. But something deeper. Gratitude. For the boundary I had once been terrified to enforce. And for the woman who didn't run from it, who stepped into it, rebuilt herself, and chose truth. Over and over. Later that night, after everyone left and the lights dimmed, we walked out to the parking lot together. The air was cool, magnolia sweet. She unlocked her car, then turned back to me. "You know what I miss?" "What?" "Sundays at Mom's, before everything, before we both broke and rebuilt." I leaned against my car. Yeah, I miss them too. She opened her mouth to say something else, then stopped. Instead, she walked over and hugged me. Not rushed, not awkward. A real full hug. The kind that lets you breathe out what you've been holding in. That night, I pulled up our website, Debt and Grace, and added a new tab. Our story, the full journey. And in the bio, I finally wrote, "This began with betrayal." But it didn't end there. Because healing is a choice. Boundaries are a form of love. And sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones that set you free. And that's what this was in the end. A story, not one I ever asked to live through, but one I'm proud to have told. Because I'm not just the sister who was stolen from. I'm the woman who stood back up and built something stronger from the wreckage.